This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner and fun. That is Dr. Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, the baseball season starts tomorrow. The Detroit Tigers take their roster and they go to Canada and they face Toronto in the opening series for the season. And it's kind of crept up on us, but here we are. The season's about to start. And now with the podcast, we're going to air weekly. Tigers Talk is back, baby. We're now, basically, this is the kickoff edition, the season premiere podcast talking about the Detroit Tigers. We got a lot to get to. But first, I always want to thank the sponsors that make this broadcast possible, the Detroit Sports Commission and the Legacy Football Organization. Without their great support, wouldn't be able to broadcast every single week like we do. And we always show support here on the network for those that support us. But Vito, interesting stuff now, the stuff that has been kind of talked about in terms of the roster, who's made the starting rotation, thoughts about Nick Castellanos and the way in which the organization is going to maybe view him and things like that. But to start, everybody's talking about it. Daniel Norris was officially shipped to the bullpen. He did not make the five-man rotation. Jordan Zimmerman's the guy. He's going to start the season. Game 1, he's the opening day starter. And I guess by default, he's the best pitcher. The starters are okay, but you look at it, without Michael Fulmer, there's a big hole, but Turnbull gets the nod over Daniel Norris. What was your reaction to the five-man starting rotation that was announced?
Well, Zim should not be the ace. I mean, he wouldn't be the ace of any contending ball club in Major League Baseball right now. But because of the depleted nature of the Tigers' rotation moving into opening day, Doc, they have their hands forced and tied to the arm of Jordan Zimmerman, who once again at this point in his career should not be an opening day starter. Yet he is for the Tigers to start up the season on the road against Toronto, and Spencer Turnbull, as you mentioned, has made the five-man Tigers rotation entering the regular season. Norris, the lefty, in the bullpen to start off the campaign. Now, hopefully, as the season does progress here, Doc, Norris builds up enough stamina and enough quality innings out of the pen to where the Tigers can utilize him then in the rotation moving forward this season, because Norris still, and him being in his prime, means that he should be a starting arm moving forward in his big league career. I think to maximize the highest level of production out of Norris and to get the most value out of him in a Tigers uni, the Tigers will need to do so by having Norris in the rotation. So I really do hope, Doc, that Norris is used as a starting arm at some point this season and before it is too late. And then really quick to touch on Spencer Turnbull making the rotation. Remember, he started against the Brew Crew down the stretch last season in Milwaukee. And that was in the game where Christian Yelich actually won the batting title in the NL. So Yelich had the great season. The Brewers had the great season, won the NL Central, and really hit up Spencer Turnbull. They had their way with him. And now he's in the big league rotation to start the season. Well, he's not the sexiest arm or option, but he does throw hard. It's just, what other pitches does he possess, and can he do it? Can he throw hard with command? That is still to be determined.
Officially, it's Jordan Zimmerman, Matthew Boyd, Spencer Turnbull, Matt Moore, and Tyson Ross.
How about that 3 through 5? A bunch of guys that probably would not be in other major league rotations, of teams that are contenders or even teams that are a little bit better. I mean, there's not many teams in the American League that are worse off than the Tigers going into the regular season, outside of Baltimore. Baltimore Tigers, you could flip-flop. I think the O's will be the worst team in the AL, but not by much, because the Tigers are right there, too, as in the low man on the totem pole in the American League.
Yeah, it looks tough. Zimmerman, Boyd are going to have to do a lot of work. You're going to need some, basically, best-case scenario, Matt Moore, Tyson Ross, they show some things, and 3 through 5, maybe you can get something in a trade in return. I think a lot of these guys on the rotation and in the starting lineup for the Detroit Tigers, if they have good seasons, might open themselves up to help the club later on with trades, most notably Nick Castellanos, which I guess you can maybe set me straight and help the listeners understand as well. So the situation with Nick Castellanos was kind of talked about maybe in terms of the fact that maybe he would not start the season on the roster. But now that the season's here, he's on it. He's going to be, playing every single day. And the talk, in the last few weeks has been that Nick Castellanos might earn a new contract. And so there's now more and more talk that maybe he will just be a guy that, if you sign him for a couple more years at a reasonable price, that you can just keep him. But others are saying, you know what, this year, right from game one, is just a season-long audition, and if you can sign him relatively affordably, then it makes it even easier to move him along at the trade deadline. Obviously, it's going to be important for him to really start the season off well, hit the ball, and really perform, a little bit better defensively, because that, I think, is what is hindering the Tigers from being able to really go out there and make a move, because people are lowballing El Avila. It's kind of obvious, because when you look at his defensive stats and his defensive numbers, sabermetrically, they're not the best. And you got a guy that kind of doesn't have really a strong position to field. And, whether he could be a DH, whether he's an outfielder, whether he goes back to third base if he leaves here. How do you view Nick Castellanos' situation? And do you see him obviously needing to perform well? Or do you say, you know what, this guy at a reasonable price can hit the ball, he can still be around, and we don't have to necessarily look at him as a guy that's destined to be shipped out of here?
I think it is a season-long audition, and more like a first half of the season audition, because you have that non-waiver, July 31 trade deadline, going to be the only trade deadline now in Major League Baseball moving forward, season in, season out. So Castellanos, his first half, his numbers that he puts up, Doc, are huge for the Tigers in terms of what they get in return for Nick Castellanos. As they look to deal him, I still really believe they are looking for trade suitors actively for the services of Nick Castellanos, who has been hard to deal, not because of money he's making or offensive production, but because of defense. Defensive metrics say that he's not a good right fielder, not a good third baseman. Where the hell can he play on the diamond consistently? And he's a good bat, a bat that you want in the middle of your order on a regular basis. But fielding-wise, his metrics do not grade very well. So because of that, Doc, the quality of return you can get for Nick Castellanos more than likely is very low. Middle-tier prospects, that means at the very best, in return for Nick C. And the thing is, with the stick that Nick C possesses, he could technically get you a return of guys that maybe are top-tier prospects, or at least one top-tier prospect. And I think the reason why they have brought up long-term contract extension talks with Nick C, Doc, is because they want to get him on a cost-effective deal that maybe makes him even more of a sexy trade chip as they near that trade deadline on July 31.
Okay. Nick Castellanos obviously is a guy that can hit the ball, obviously doing some things in spring training. Some other news and notes. Miguel Cabrera has hit the ball pretty effectively in spring training. Many people are going to have thoughts about him, and they're going to keep an eye on Miguel Cabrera to see what it's going to be like for him to kind of be on a team and go through a full season if he plays on a team that really isn't that good. Because remember, last year was marred by injury. He didn't go through the whole year with that bicep injury. So we never really got a chance to see how he would react to the losing and, the grind of, 162 games. Because obviously when Michael Fulmer goes down, isn't it safe to assume that the win-loss record from about 64 wins is probably going to be a lot less than in previous years? I think that the last 2 years, what was it, 64 and 90?
64 and 98.
64?
Back-to-back campaigns.
Exactly. Is it safe to assume that that number might be lower in 2019?
Well, I think without Fulmer's presence in the rotation, sure. Because he was a guy that you were depending upon for top-of-the-rotation kind of production. Without him, you got Jay Zim and Matthew Boyd. I love Boyd as a person, even on the baseball mound. But him as the number 2 in your rotation isn't good enough to sustain success over the long term. And the thing is, it's a 162-game regular season. So it's all about endurance, sustaining success over that long period of time. It's a long season, Doc.
I think they're going to end up in the 60s somewhere, but I think maybe they could be a little better.
But it could be...
a couple games here and there.
It really, though, you could say it could be below what they actually went last year, 64 and 98. Is that sustainable? Sure, they could get to that. Their benchmark is 65, I think. 65 wins on the season. Below that, though, is more than likely, I think. So you could actually beg them for 64 wins again, a third straight 64-98 campaign at this point.
Is that fair to start at 64 wins?
I say, why not? Well, because he just did it the past 2 seasons, and this year's ball club is not better. It's worse, if anything.
Why do you say that?
Well, Fulmer being out. You look at your lineup, you have Cabrera and Castellanos. Can Cabrera stay healthy for a full season? Cassie might be dealt by midseason. So with that being said, Cabrera could be out on the IL injured list by midway. Castellanos could be on another ball club midway. And then what does that mean for the offensive production on your team? It dips a lot. And that's why you could see the Tigers feasibly going 62-100. And in so many words, losing at least 100 games. And I really believe after doing my projections for the American League this season from division to division, Doc, I could see the Tigers stacking up at the very bottom of the American League. Being not the low man on the totem pole, let's say, because of the Baltimore Orioles and how woeful they're going to be in the American League East, in a very tough American League East division. But the Tigers could still easily be the second worst team in the American League this season and be one of the top 5 worst ball clubs in all of baseball, too.
And then the unfortunate news that we heard over the weekend was JaCoby Jones, starting the year off on the injured list, sprained shoulder. How concerning is that, especially for a guy that was looking to rebound a little bit, to be a little bit more consistent at the plate? This is a guy, it's interesting in that you see a guy that has the raw talent. He has the ability, but can he, really perform at the level of a major leaguer where he's available and can perform consistently on in both sides, offensively and defensively? And so that's a big question mark. And now he starts this year again on the injured list, and it's looking like Mikie, Mahtook, and Niko Goodrum will split the workload in JaCoby Jones' absence. It's a loss, but I don't really know how much of a loss it'll be because Mahtook and Goodrum are serviceable, and I don't know if them together will equate to the production that JaCoby Jones, with a rebound year and his productivity, I think is a little bit better than those two guys, but not a whole heck of a lot, not significantly. So, it's just unfortunate that, the news was delivered regarding JaCoby Jones.
Well, they won't replace his production defensively. I mean, JaCoby is a great center fielder, great outfielder, great athlete, so can cover a ton of ground. And you really need him to be able to do so at spacious Comerica Park. So JaCoby brings that. He is an asset defensively. It's with the bat. His bat stunk anyways last year. So you got to believe the combination of Mahtook and Goodrum, especially with Goodrum playing out there too, is going to be a bump in offensive production. So a slight increase there offensively, but a big dip defensively. And that's why the metrics support JaCoby Jones starting in center over the likes of Mahtook and Goodrum, who are not adequate defensively, and especially Goodrum, who has become much more of a middle infielder, a guy that is a super utility man who started a lot, remember, last season at second base, and now got bumped from there because of the signing of Josh Harrison in the offseason. Yet Goodrum could still spell Harrison at second, play some shortstop, play first base, subsequently spell Cabrera at first base, where I think Goodrum will be needed a lot this year, and especially if Cabrera succumbs to injury. If he ends up being hurt for a prolonged period of time, well, then Goodrum is your first baseman. So I like the odds of Goodrum playing a lot of games still, even though he's not a starter going into opening day. Yet, with that injury to JaCoby Jones, as you mentioned, Doc, he will be spelling Jones out there and splitting duties with Mikie Mahtook. And I do like what they bring with the stick. But once again, defensively, and the defensive metrics truly support this, it's a big dip defensively, going from JaCoby Jones to that combo out in center field.
Yeah, this year in June, the Detroit Tigers are going to pick 5th in the draft as a result of last year. And maybe this year, the campaign will be to, continue to draft well and to see about all these young arms and things like that. I'm interested to see how Spencer Turnbull is going to look. You talked about him in terms of, getting knocked around a little bit last year. But from what you've heard, what you've read, what you've seen this year in spring training, do you think he has a chance to be a guy that can at least be a stabilizing force, maybe get 5-6 wins by the All-Star break and at least look like a guy that we can kind of pay attention to? Or you think it's going to be a roller coaster and maybe a guy that has maybe a stronger chance of flaming out?
Well, you know what? He looked good in spring. He can throw hard. He has showcased that. So you got to like that about him. But everything else, I don't think you like a lot about him. So is he a big league starting arm? Probably not. He's probably a guy that you use out of the bullpen in long relief. Or maybe he becomes that nice bullpen arm that can even just pitch an inning or to a couple of batters, to 3 batters, right, as it is now, and stay in the majors because of that. I just don't see him as an asset in the Tigers' rotation.
What will Tyson Ross and Matt Moore bring to the table for this rotation?
Well, not a lot of wins because the Tigers suck, and Matt Moore might suck himself. He was one of the worst arms in big league baseball when he was pitching last year. Now, Tyson Ross coming back from injury, pitched in the bullpen last year too with the Cardinals, and started, was last though really good with the Padres, and that was a while back now. So at this point in his career, after dealing with the injury bug, you have to, I think, settle your expectations for him at a very low mark, yet he could be the guy that is the low-risk, high-reward candidate. because they're not spending a lot of dollars on him, and he could be a guy that provides you valuable innings in the Tigers' rotation this season. Thus, you could flip him in a deal leading up to the July 31 trade deadline, and that would be the greatest amount of value that Tyson Ross could bring to the Tigers this season. Same thing for Matt Murdock. It is if you could flip those guys for a package of prospects come that July 31 trade deadline.
Before the break, I want to make an argument that I think it's good that the Tigers are starting on the road. Starting on the road versus Toronto allows them to kind of ease into the season, play a week before you got to come home to your fans. Because, early on, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to have everything dialed up. But I like the fact that Jordan Zimmerman and Matthew Boyd will have a chance to kind of kick off the season on the road and pitch versus Toronto. Now, it could get out of hand because, Toronto is a team that has above average talent and can do some things at home. So on that front, I understand that it's going to be a challenge in this opening series versus Toronto, but I think it's good because, next Thursday when the Tigers do in fact return home to play in front of probably the biggest crowd they might see the entire year, I do think that you want to be a little bit further along, make sure you're playing well defensively, playing well fundamentally. So I think it's good to start versus Toronto on the road 2019 season.
I think wherever they start off, they're not going to look pretty. Now, I'll just say this, though. Toronto is not going to be that great of a ball club this season. Actually, they rank 4th in the American League East in my projections for the AL this season. So they're not going to be a very good ball club. Now, can they hit? Yes. Can they pitch? No. Meaning the Tigers could tee off against them, too. Maybe Cabrera does some damage. Castellanos, Goodrum, maybe they do some damage to start up the season in this 4-game set against Toronto to kick off the campaign. Now, can be a relatively tough place to play, and probably opening day, you got to give the edge to the Blue Jays. But their pitching is very suspect, even when you consider Marcus Stroman leading the rotation, Aaron Sanchez coming after that in the rotation. 2 legit big league arms who struggled for the majority of last season. So can the Tigers get hits off of them? Can they score runs off of those Blue Jays arms? Yes. And that's why you got to be a little bit optimistic about the Tigers' odds going into this opening series. But it's still on the road, and Toronto still can hit, and your pitching is going to be very lackluster all season long. And that 1-2 combo, Jay Zim and Matthew Boyd, should not be the 1-2 combo of any big league rotation, yet it is for the Tigers. Meaning that combo and the team as a whole is going to be very suspect and susceptible to losing all season long, and maybe even getting rocked at times against certain major league lineups. It's just that you got to be a little bit optimistic still about the Tigers' odds because the Blue Jays aren't the toughest foe they will face all this season. And remember, Boyd was a Blue Jay at one point. So maybe nice start to start the season for himself. Gets that in early here, and the Tigers look all right. But you know what, the odds for the Tigers this season, it's going to be every single series where I act like, you know what, the odds aren't too high for them because they're just going to be one of the worst teams in the AL and in all of baseball this season, Doc.
And then, Vito, to start off April, 3 games on the road versus the Yankees.
Yeah, the best team in the American League based on my projections, too.
So you want probably to come home Thursday, April 4th, home opener, hopefully 3-4, 4-3. That would be acceptable for the first week, right? I think that if you can get 3 or 4 wins of the first 7, and probably the majority of them happening in Toronto, if you can get a couple wins there, I do think that potentially, the Tigers may be viewed as underdogs in a lot of these matchups, but I do think they'll be in games. I think to start the year, they'll be competitive. When you got Miguel Cabrera, arguably one of the best hitters, I think that the question mark will be, are there going to be runners on base for him to try and drive in? A lot of his home runs might be single solo home run shots. But I do think there's an opportunity every couple games with Zimmerman and Matthew Boyd. If they're healthy and they can be effective, you can be competitive in those games. And then you hope for, some spot starts and some quality starts from the likes of Ross and Moore and things like that. So, I'm hoping, I'm probably early on predicting 2-5, but I'm going to hope for 3-4.
So the Tigers need to do some good quality road cooking against the Blue Jays and the Yankees somehow, some way in the Bronx. The best team in the American League, best team in all of baseball, perhaps, too. Now, once again, the likelihood of that occurring isn't very high, so you got to hope that Zimmerman and Boyd take advantage of the Blue Jays in those first 2 games, because the Blue Jays are your best chance of getting some wins, getting a win before you start off the season at home. So, to get a win before you play against the Royals, you might have to beat the Blue Jays, because when you go into the Bronx and try to face the Yankees and beat the Yankees right now with their potent lineup, all bets are off for the likelihood of the Tigers even getting a win against the Yanks to kick off the season.
Now stay tuned after the break. Vito's done his homework. He's going to take you around Major League Baseball. We will maybe discuss the Justin Verlander extension, 2 years, $66 million, 2 more years with the Astros. We'll talk about that. And then Vito has, his breakdown of every division in Major League Baseball. And I want to ask him, too, about the American League Central because I got a thought about the division in which the Tigers play. Stay with us. You're listening to Tigers Talk on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc, I would love to hear your thought, but first, a commercial spot from the Legacy Football Organization. And the Legacy Football Organization, Doc, was founded in 2009. It is the premier off-season development program in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and in the entire U.S. of A. It provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the football field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And it features a staff of many prominent collegiate stars and NFL players, including former legendary Lions wide receiver Herman Moore, and a past guest of Two Bad Hombres, and former 3-time All-American linebacker at Michigan State University, Greg Jones. So to find out more about Legacy Football and all of the events they are bringing to their lovely complex, called the Legacy Center in Brighton, Michigan, please contact National Director of Football Ops, Justin Sassante, or go online to Legacy's terrific website at legacyfootballorg.com. And guys, make sure to also check out the Detroit Sports Commission today and every single day of the week at detroitsports.org for all of the events they are bringing to our very region. That is the Metro Detroit area. And since 2001, by the way, guys, the individuals at the Detroit Sports Commission have been working hard to bring thousands and have been successful in bringing thousands and thousands of events to the Metro Detroit area. To find out today about all of the events they are bringing once again to the Metro Detroit area, please follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And once again, make sure to check out the Detroit Sports Commission's terrific website at detroitsports.org. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And Doc, you had something to bring up with me. You wanted to ask me about the American League Central. Then I have my predictions for the AL Central, the entire American League, to get to.
Well, Vito, when you told me the rundown and you had discussed with me what you want to talk about and what the purpose you wanted to be for this episode, I thought, okay, very good. You want to break down the divisions, kind of give people a sense of who's going to be contenders, who are the pretenders. And so I started to look around the league, and obviously you start off with the American League Central. And so when I had a chance to review the American League Central, I just said, oh boy. And I said to myself, and looking at the teams, the majority of them are in rebuilds. There's really only one team that probably is going to win the division. It's probably going to be the Cleveland Indians. Minnesota could be, an unsung hero, could be an underdog that could maybe make some noise in 2019. But all across the board, the rest of the division, the Royals, the Tigers, and the White Sox are teams that really don't have a chance to contend. So I want to ask you, is the American League Central the worst division in the entire major leagues?
Doc, it was last year. Where were you? Were you sleeping during last season? This year it should be again. 3 lackluster ball clubs. 2 really lackluster ball clubs, though, in the Royals and the Tigers. And the Tigers are still more lackluster. I'll use that adjective again to describe the Tigers. More lackluster than the rest of the American League Central division. And once again, you got 2 or 3, 2 at least in that division, they're going to be among the worst in all of baseball. The White Sox are in the up and up. I'm going to give them that much. Their outlook is not bleak.
They spent money.
For the Royals and Tigers, very bleak outlooks. Indians, Twins, 1 and 2. Twins, though, are getting closer and closer to catapulting the Indians for AL Central supremacy. And now Jose Ramirez, the star third baseman for the Indians, is hurt to start the season. A guy that can play third, play second, hit for power, can field as well. Him and Lindor are the best offensive assets, the best players perhaps on the Indians ball club entering the regular season. At least they're the position players, because you have to be fair to the rotation led by Corey Kluber, Carlos Carrasco, guys like that are potent arms, are sexy arms to lead a big league rotation that allow your team, as in the Indians, to be a contender. Not only in the American League Central, which is the weakest division, yes, in all of baseball, but in the entire American League. Yet, among the 3 divisions and the 3 projected division winners that I have in the American League this season, Doc, the Indians are the weakest of the 3. And you could almost argue, and I will argue, by far, the Indians are the weakest division winner in the American League, of my division winners.
Okay, to start, obviously, we'll start in the AL Central. You probably have atop the division the Cleveland Indians.
I do, but barely above the Twins. Indians, Twins, White Sox in third. And I think I'll say this once again, the White Sox far above the Royals and the Tigers. Royals, Tigers, the last 2 teams in the Central.
Tell me about the White Sox. I know they made some moves. They spent some money.
Well, they still need rotation help. but they can hit. They've got Jose Abreu, who's a big guy in the middle of that order, who can hit for power, can hit for average. So you got to like him there and his steady production. Now, outside of him, it becomes weaker and weaker of a lineup. But then they have a top outfield prospect, maybe the best one in all of baseball, and best position player prospect in all of baseball entering the season. And that is Eloy Jimenez, a guy that they got from the Cubs that could hit for 30 home runs, can hit for average, can do it all. So if he becomes that for the White Sox, at least moving forward, you got a potent middle-of-the-order bat in Eloy Jimenez. Then their second baseman, Yoan Moncada. He is expected to be better than last year. Yet remember, he struck out a ton last season, and way too many times for the White Sox to be completely optimistic about him turning around things in terms of being able to rectify his plate discipline issues. Because that was a large concern for him and the White Sox last season because he struck out a ton, 150 plus times. Way too often for a guy that young, because now you can say he's developing bad habits at the plate. Once again, though, the White Sox are leaps and bounds above the Royals and the Tigers. The last two teams, in my estimation, in the American League Central Division going into the regular season.
So what makes you think that Cleveland, at the end of 162 games, will be the division winner?
Their pitching, their starting rotation. It's going to, I think, come down to that for the Indians. Because their rotation is still one of the best in the American League. And the entire majors, too. So you have a former Cy Young Award winner in Corey Kluber. So that rotation spearheaded by him is a lot better than the Twins rotation, the White Sox's rotation, the Royals and Tigers rotations collectively. And you can argue the Indians rotation is better than the Red Sox's rotation, than the Yankees rotation. Maybe not the Stros' rotation, which is led by JV, Justin Verlander, a newly paid man who is getting now $33 million a year, the highest annual salary for a pitcher in big league history. And then Garrett Cole. That 1-2 combination in Houston is the best, more than likely in all of baseball. But the Indians are right there behind the Stros in terms of rotation, power, strength, and depth even. Because you have a guy in Clevenger out there too in Cleveland who can be a nice number 4, a nice back end of the rotation arm. So because of the Indians' rotation depth, I like the Indians a lot winning the American League Central Division and at least having a slight hope of making a run in the playoffs this year.
Now, before you give us information regarding the rest of the American League and National League in terms of division-by-division breakdown, who you think are pretenders, contenders, and things like that, do you want to go cover opening day if it works out? I'm on the screen now.
I would like to be there. That's the plan, yeah.
Bit of business. I have applied for both Vito and I to have season-long credentials. Keep your fingers crossed out there, listeners, that it does work out. Now, I probably, I'm thinking 50-50. We have a chance of just, earning outright the ability to go cover every single game. But if there is an opportunity to go, or if we are denied, then you would like to go at least cover opening day, you and I.
Man, we could get denied is what you're telling me?
Season long means we just show up and cover the team. And that would be great because, our plan's in place. We know what to do. But, it would stink to have to go on the computer every single day.
Which we did last year. Now, we did it valiantly, and we succeeded. We covered every single game that we applied for, I believe. So
yes.
The Tigers did like us. They respected us. We respected them. Now, we're going for that season-long pass. The odds of us getting that, fingers crossed, as you just did there, Doc, nobody can see it, but fingers crossed, the odds of it in a big Vito's over-under game, what are they? Are they above 50%?
At least to be there, I think it's 52%.
I think above 50, at least a little bit. And the Tigers' odds of winning the American League Central Division are well under that. More like 0.5, 0.0000005%, something like that, because they're going to be lackluster once again. And one of the worst teams in all of baseball, Doc, easily, in my estimation.
Exactly. So tell me about what you think in the American League East.
I think the East is won by the Yankees. Remember, the Red Sox won it all last year, won the division, beat up on the Yanks head-to-head. Now, Aaron Boone has to prove that he can beat the Bo Sox head-to-head this upcoming season. Can Booney do that? They're in the Bronx. Big expectations upon his shoulders in that lineup, that rotation, that team collectively. The thing is, a lot of star power assembled on that ball club going into the regular season. And they didn't add Bryce Harper or Manny Machado to upgrade their lineup. They didn't need to, though. They have all this young talent, and they decided they didn't want to spend all of that money on those guys. Instead, they upgraded their bullpen. They got Zach Britton. They got Adam Ottavino from the Rockies. Back end of the pen arms that are legit. Back end of the pen arms that are reliable game in, game out. Thus, the Yankees are my favorite to win the American League East currently, and my favorite to reach the World Series out of the American League. But right behind them is the Boston Red Sox, who, remember, let's not count them out yet because they won it all last year and should be a very good ball club, a potent ball club once again. And it's because of their lineup. It's about the strength of that lineup from top to bottom for the Red Sox that gives them an edge in almost every team outside of the Yanks, in my estimation. And then in third place, I have the Rays. In fourth place, the Jays. In fifth place, the Baltimore Orioles, who, remember, lost 100-plus games. I believe 115 games the O's lost last year. And now they don't have Manny Machado walking through those doors at Camden Yards anymore. They don't have Adam Jones walking through those doors either. They have Chris Crash Davis, who cannot hit to save his life. I mean, he hit below 200 last year. His projection from a lot of people is well below 200 for a batting average once again. Their rotation is a lackluster, Doc. Let me tell you. Dylan Bundy, once a former top prospect for the O's, is their staff ace. He should not be the staff ace of any team in the majors. Now, he still throws the ball with some zip, but the stuff that he used to have is gone, long gone. And he's their rotation ace. So it's not looking very good for the O's going into the regular season, and they're going to lose 100 games again very easily.
I'm kind of surprised that you didn't pick Boston. Obviously, the defending World Series champions. I think they got a lot of talent on that squad. I think that they didn't lose a big amount of pieces. They've acquired some talent that I think will be contributors to that team. So it'll be interesting. I do think it'll be a race down to the wire. Boston and the Yankees. Those series when they take place during the year are going to be amazing.
And the Rays won 90 games last year, which is surprising to a lot of people. Kevin Cash, this great manager for the Rays last year. Now, can they sustain the success going with the model of having a couple of rotation arms, such as the Cy Young winner and Blake Snell from a season ago, and then openers, starting the games with bullpen arms? How about that model for success? Can it be carried over and sustained, a sustainable model for success for the Rays in 2019? A model that is going to be adopted by many other ball clubs going into 2019 and beyond. And really quick for Baltimore, it's just a shame for that ballpark. Camden Yards, it's going to be a hugely lackluster product. The O's are going to be one of the worst teams in Major League history. They already were last year, and once again, they lost Manny Machado. They lost Adam Jones. They don't have a staff ace to name. They have really no pitching help, no pitching depth whatsoever. They're going to be the lame ducks of the majors in 2019.
All right, hit me with what's going on in the AL West with Mike Trout, taking over there, having a big contract. I do think that, the Angels, their biggest weakness is now at manager, but they got talent.
Who's the manager? Brad Ausmus, maybe? Yeah, a weak-ass manager. Sorry, Brad Ausmus. Brad Ausmus? Oops. How about a good manager leading the way in the Stros' manager, A.J. Hinch, though?
So
Hinch
obviously...
in the Stros, number one. Go on, Doc.
The Astros, the class of,
yes.
The division. But obviously, I think now we have a chance to bring it home and have a comparison. In 2019, which team has more wins? The LA Angels of Anaheim or the Detroit Tigers?
Oh, the Angels have a good lineup because of Trout. The Andrelton Simmons, they can hit a little bit.
Justin Upton?
Jay Up is still there in the middle of that order. So they can hit a little bit. Now, they're not going to be great from top to bottom in that lineup or as a team, but they could finish in third because the rest of that division is going to be stinko. Rangers, I have in dead last. M's in fourth. The M's won't be much better than the Rangers. But the Angels have a chance of being by far the third best team in the American League West this season. Now, above them, the class of the division is easily the Astros, who could very easily return to the World Series. They didn't a year ago. Remember, the Red Sox catapulted them for American League supremacy. But the Stros, with JV and Garrett Cole leading the way in that rotation, could very easily, and guys like George Springer, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa in that lineup could very well lead the Stros to American League supremacy. Now, after the Stros, though, the A's, who were a surprise team from last year, won 97 games, 98 games out of nowhere, but maybe have the best manager in the division. So the best manager, I'm going to say, is not named A.J. Hinch, who has done a hell of a job in Houston, but it is Bob Melvin, who has had experience managing the Arizona Diamondbacks as well, has managed the A's now for a long time. The Yankees were knocking on his door hardcore to try to get him from Oakland before they hired Aaron Boone. So the Yankees even wanted him. And when the Yankees want you, typically that means that you've got some cachet, some success, and you're a proven big league skipper, coming with a nice resume and a lot of credentials. And Bob Melvin has built up a hell of a resume. They're in the American League West, leading the way for the A's, and now for a long time. And sorry to dog Brad Ausmus once again. Brad Ausmus, oops. But Bob Melvin has a much better resume than Brad Ausmus at this point, who is getting a second chance at being a big league skipper. And I almost have to say, why the hell is he getting a second chance at being a big league skipper? And now Trout's there long term, and that's your manager, at least for a couple of the seasons to come. Good luck to Mike Trout and company out there in L.A.
So to recap, in the American League, you got, as the division winners, the Indians, the Yankees, and the Astros.
Yes.
And who likely rounds out the playoffs in the American League? Is it Boston?
Well, I think of the wild card. Yeah, Boston, you're going to get, and then also the Rays or Twins. Twins are going to be good, by the way. New manager, Rocco Baldelli. They upgraded their ball club. They have Nelson Cruz there. Their rotation should be a little bit better, I think, overall-wise than last year, too. So watch out for the Twins. They're going to be better than last year. And remember, 2 years ago, they were a good ball club. And 2 years ago, I believe it was when Paul Molitor won American League Skipper of the Year. So after this past season, he got ousted. Now a new skipper there. But I think Minnesota is more well-equipped to make a run at the American League Central crown this year than last year. And they don't have Joe Mauer, who was the class of St. Paul, Minnesota, and everything. But he was, wearing out last year. And the Twins this season, just collectively, I like them more on paper going into the season than a season ago. And I also like their chances in the American League Central more this year because the Indians aren't as potent. I could see the Indians taking a step back or two. Now, still winning the American League Central division, but not by much. And realistically, I could see the Indians winning the division by only a game or two. And in Sports Illustrated, SI actually had the Twins winning that division by a game. So the Indians, I'm going to flip-flop and have the Indians winning, but like I said, I think by a game or 2 or 3 at the very most.
All right, Vito. Very good assessment of what's going to happen in the American League. I'm in line with the majority of what you said. All right, take me through the National League. What you got?
Well, the NL is a little bit tougher to go through. I know the American League a little bit better. But the NL, I would go with the Nats still in the National League East, even after losing Bryce Harper, because they added Patrick Corbin. They have him, Strasburg, and Scherzer to lead the rotation. That 1 through 3 is sexy, baby. I mean, that gets me going on a Monday morning. That could still and should still catapult the Nats above the Phillies for NL East supremacy. Now, in the Central Division is the best in all of baseball. The Pirates are projected to finish in dead last, yet they're not that bad on paper. Now, they lost the extremely sexy double play combo of Josh Harrison and Jordy Mercer to the Detroit Tigers, but the Pirates really aren't that bad of a ball club, yet in that deep division, they're going to finish in last more than likely. Now, the Cards added Paul Goldschmidt for the middle of their lineup, a great first baseman with the glove, too. The Cards, with the addition of him, should finish in first place. Even though, remember, the Brew Crew are still there, and they won the division a season ago, and they barely did above the Cubs, who could finish in third, and I think will. So right now I have the Cards 1, the Brewers 2, the Cubs 3 in the NL Central. Now in the NL West, I still think the Dodgers make a run. Now, to win, it would be a 7th straight, I think, division crown in the NL West. And it would be a 3rd straight trip to the Fall Classic if they make it all the way back to the World Series. Now, they have the nice rotation again, but you know what? With Kershaw injured to start the season, getting older and older, I believe is 31 now, so not on the right side of 30, that hurts the Dodgers' odds of making a deep run in this postseason. And I think because of that, the Dodgers are going to make the playoffs. But you know what? There could be somebody else emerging in that division, such as the Padres at least getting a little bit better. And then the Rockies, who remember, were knocking on the door in that division last season down the stretch. Now, the Dodgers got it done in the end, but the Rockies were right there. And the Rockies should be able to hit once again. Had a nice rotation last year. So I like the Rockies' odds, and I just believe, Doc, that those guys in Dodger Blue are due for a downturn at least of some magnitude. And because of that, I don't think the Dodgers win the National League West Division. So at this point, I guess I'm going with the Rockies. As tough as it is to say that somebody else is going to win the National League West Division, I think if it's not the Dodgers, and I'm going to say it's not going to be them, then it's going to be the Colorado Rockies.
So, Vito, you're saying that the NL Central Division is one to watch outside of the American League Central because it features talent all across the board and likely will have the best race, is what you're saying?
I think the NL Central and the NL East will be 2 really good races from start to finish.
So, Vito, who's likely to be the wild card teams in the National League?
I think the Dodgers, because I have the Rockies winning the NL West. So the Dodgers are still going to make the playoffs. They're still too talented of a roster not to make it. Then after that, it's harder for me, but I would say the Phillies. I think the Phillies and Dodgers make it as NL wildcards, yet they both could still win their divisions, too, because they are that good of ball clubs.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, those that had hopes that Justin Verlander might return back to the Tigers, unfortunately, it's not going to happen. 2 more years, he signed a massive deal. I found it interesting that they gave him $33 million for a pitcher in his 30s, but you know what? The guy is a freak of nature. He gets outs. He is box office. He's a guy that can still throw upper mid-90s and can dial it up. So I would say that contract was well worth it. 2 years, short term, but at big money. Was it worth it? And do you think that Justin Verlander, like he says, could have a resurgence and continue this hot pitching streak that he's been on for the last few seasons into his 40s?
Well, it's no resurgence at this point for Justin Verlander.
Well, from where he started, because when he had those oblique injuries and a couple down years, he gets traded to the Astros, and all of a sudden he's pitching better, arguably, than he did in Detroit. You could say he was healthy. Some people have looked at it and said that, working with the analytics and the pitching staff over there, the coaches in Houston, it's made him a much better pitcher, obviously getting a ring, and last year he had a decent year. So, the new situation has obviously helped him, and there are guys who, like Nolan Ryan, like Roger Clemens, have success in their late 30s and even in their 40s. So do you see that for Justin Verlander?
And Verlander can whip it like the two of them, too. I mean, he has a rocket right-handed arm. And by the way, 2017, once he was dealt to the Astros, down the stretch had an ERA of 1.06. Last year at the Stros, it was 2.52. So very good ERA marks and better than what he was doing with the Tigers right before that. And then his FIPs, as in his fielding independent pitching marks, prove that he was a very effective arm the past season and a half in a Stros uniform, with a 2.69 mark with the Stros down the stretch in 2017. And then last year as a whole, a 2.78 mark. So he's not slowing down by any stretch of the imagination and can still throw the fastball with zip. So he can get to 98, really amp it up when he has to. So I like this deal for Justin Verlander. He's getting paid the highest annual salary by a pitcher in Major League Baseball history, with $33 million a year over the next 2 seasons now. So he's getting paid handsomely. And guess what? He deserves it, as it's kind of a legacy deal as the Tigers did or gave to Miguel Cabrera, and now that's an albatross of a contract. But that was a long-term deal. So I like this more, and it's a sexier deal to me and more of a feasible one that I'd be willing to give to an arm like Justin Verlander too, because it's only for 2 years. At 2 years, why not give him $33 million a season? It's not like you're extending him for 4 or 5 seasons down the line where he's going to be in his 40s then, and then he's not nearly as sharp or effective. So I really love this deal for the Stros and for Justin Verlander as well. But I would say even more I love this deal for JV, getting paid for what he's proven in the past, but also for what the Astros are expecting to get out of that right-handed arm of JV over the course of the next 2 campaigns.
All right, before we get out of here, I got one last closing thought. Major League Baseball obviously did the right thing, and they honored Ichiro when Seattle went out to Japan to face the Oakland A's. But by and large, outside of the whole Ichiro send-off, he played the 2 games, and they showed him the proper respect in his home country. Played, I think, till the 8th inning of the last game, and he got the curtain call. I'm okay with that, but I think the scheduling is what bothered me the most. Already, 2 teams have played 2 games. The Mariners, who are sitting at 2-0, and the Athletics, who lost both of those games in Japan. I would say this. When you have this gimmick, and I know you want to always make the game look like a global game and things like that, it's kind of weird when you have these 2 games that are taking place surrounding other spring training games. So I'm a fan of, look, if you want to start the season all on one day, but some teams are playing in Japan, so be it. But don't start it a week ago where, if you're a diehard, you have to wake up at like 4 a.m. to watch these things. I mean, I'm a working man. I can't get up at 4:30 a.m. or 6
Well, who
a.m.
is, regardless if you're a working man or a college kid that's sleeping in and is lazy.
Exactly.
Right?
So I didn't get a chance to see it live. I had to see all the coverage. I would have liked to have seen Ichiro being sent off. So I think that Major League Baseball, if you want to have these games, just start it at the same time. I mean, could you imagine the NFL starting a real game and then have 2 more practice games and then start it's just...
It's stupid logic, right?
It's not great logic, bad timing, and, the other squads are still in spring training. So for me, I'm of the opinion, just like the NFL, start on the same day, and you can have an opening festivity. Opening week is the same for everybody. It could be across a couple days, like if you want to start on a Thursday, Friday, and that's the opening weekend, no problem. But to handle it the way that Major League Baseball did, I wasn't for it.
Who was watching those games? Once again, I wasn't waking up. I couldn't even get myself the hell out of bed. Who was really getting out of bed? No matter if you wake up really early to go to work, I guess the diehard fans and the Ichiro fans. So it was a lovely send-off for him, a great set of games for him and for his legacy to celebrate him and the player that he was in Japan and with the Mariners. But who the hell was watching it? And then, like you said, it's smack dab in the middle of other games that are spring training games, not also regular season games. So if you would have had that Japan series, those 2 games this week, it would have been much better off, and it would have been much more logical. Why couldn't you have started that series, those 2 games in Japan between the M's and A's on Wednesday of this week, today, and then have the second game tomorrow, which is the regular opening day for the rest of Major League Baseball? That's what should have been done and would have been a lot more logical, in my opinion, Doc.
On the fly, I'm debuting a new segment. Doc's Peachy Positive News and Note. And the Detroit Tigers played 29 spring training games. They won 15 of them and lost 14.
So they won more than they lost. That won't be the case in the regular season, folks. But keep being positive, and I guess you can mix that in to kind of downgrade my negativity or kind of try to wash that away.
That was Doc's Peachy Positive Note of the Week.
So you want to mix that in because I'm too negative, right? You want to try to outweigh my negativity with your positivity, even if it's a lame note. That was pretty lame. Spring training.
Vito.
15 and 14. Who cares about the regular spring training record? Come on, man.
Vito, everybody knows I'm the ray of sunshine in the world of Detroit sports. Like I posted on...
Oh, you are? Who?
Yeah, you didn't know.
The same John Macaroon that I'm talking to right now is a ray of sunshine in Detroit sports?
I posted it on Twitter, and I'll send you the picture, and that makes it true. Good job, Vito.
Because you have a picture. That makes it true. So if I have a picture and I say that I am the greatest podcaster of all time, that makes it true. I mean, you're pretty much saying you can say anything and it makes it true if you have a picture to back it up to, and then you just make the statement along with the photo?
Well, stay tuned to this week's Two Bad Hombres because you and I will discuss the media and how coverage has been of some big stories as of late. So stay tuned to this Saturday's Two Bad Hombres. We'll talk about that. But yeah, Vito, based on all the sponsor checks you're bringing me, you are, in fact, the greatest podcast salesman on earth.
Well, I say greatest podcaster. Maybe next year or when I'm 80 or something, I can say that. If I'm still here. Okay, I know you won't be. I don't think so, at least. So I'm going to be negative there to end this week's episode of Tigers Talk Doc.
Tigers Talk airs every single Wednesday. We'll be here, whether Vito records from his casa or here in the studio. We'll bring a fresh episode. Look for new content as well. A lot of new hosts want to get on the network, join the family. I'm liking it. And I believe Shay's debuting as well today. You're getting a lot of competition for the Wednesday slot, Vito.
Man,
a lot of people want to come out on Wednesday.
Some legit competition now, baby. I like it, though.
Check out Shay Norling's new gambling podcast, Wanna Bet. Airs on the network every Wednesday along with Tigers Talk. We got a great rotation. Definitely check out all the podcasts on the network at DetroitSportsPodcast.com. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. During games, feel free, tag Vito. He watches all of them. I watch all the games. So feel free. We are paying attention. Even though there's not a lot of buzz surrounding the Tigers, we are into it. We want to see the Tigers succeed. We don't believe that there's going to be a lot of wins, but there's going to be storylines we will follow. We have information. We're going to try and go out there and get it. So thank you for your support. Thank you for downloading this edition of Tigers Talk. I look forward to catching up with everybody next time.
Really quick, I like that title, Wanna Bet. Very catchy. And adios.